interview, right? We're going to be asking each other all sorts of questions with Ariel. Ariel, thank you so much for joining on with the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a nice, relatively sunny day in California, but it's nothing new since we get the sun all the time, and it gets kind of boring. Like I wouldn't mind having snow once in a while. That would be fun, but that'll never happen here. But yeah, I'm doing pretty well, and I'm just excited for like what we're gonna be doing here.
Well, boring is probably preferable to having your entire state on fire, right? Has that hasn't affected you too much over there, I hope.
Well, actually, like the minute that it started, San Francisco looked like Blade Runner because that movie had like the orange sky, and San Francisco had the same thing. But like I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm pretty much away from that. But we did get a ton of smoke in the air when that was happening. It was not orangish or red; it was more white, but that has cleared out. So that is the good news.
Yeah, I saw a drone footage that someone took of San Francisco when it legitimately looked just like Blade Runner 20, whatever the number was in that movie. And apparently, was it Ridley Scott who directed it?
I have no
I
idea. I just,
Whoever
yeah.
directed it, like made it with some of the Australia wildfires that happened, some very catastrophic wildfires years before. He like saw pictures of those wildfires, and that was the creative direction that he chose to go with Blade Runner. So really life imitating art and vice versa. There, terrifying stuff. Really kind of kicks your mind into gear and think, man, we got to do something about this.
Yeah, it really does because I mean, like personally, I lived in a suburb known as Bel Air. Now, you might remember the TV show Fresh Prince of Bel Air. That was not filmed in Bel Air. That was filmed in Brentwood, which is funny because I had two grandmas. One of them lived in Brentwood and one of them lived in Bel Air. I lived in the actual like real Bel Air. And I mean the funny thing is that like I don't know, but I don't really enjoy areas where it's kind of boring. All you have are houses, and I mean the nearest like store or supermarket is always a drive away from you, and it was fine for like my parents and my aunts and my uncles and stuff. But when you're growing up, you can't drive until you're 16. And when you're growing up in a community where the only thing that you can get to, where no buses come up to suburbs, is like a driving distance away from you, it's very I don't know, it's not that exciting. It's not it's very boring. I mean, I like because people like to assume that people who live in big houses and like a big house with a lot of rooms are like happy, but I mean that's not necessarily true. I mean, you can live in a big house with a lot of rooms and like live among people who you share nothing in common with, and there's really nothing to do up there. There's like no malls, no stores, no recreation places. So kind of something to think about.
Yeah, I grew up living with everything a drive away, and I think that's part of the reason why I grew up with video games as such a core interest of
Oh,
mine. There was nothing
oh
else
yeah,
really to do, and so I was able to explore the world through kind of that outlet and lens. Um, you know,
same.
so, like, I do approach a lot of the discussions on my channel that do come from technological lenses and everything. And part of the impetus for starting the interview between the two of us was the idea of good dollar. You made a comment to me on Twitter when I was talking about good dollar and the digital universal basic income. And you said, how about I send over a large amount of good dollar to you in exchange for an interview? And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. But then I started thinking, how do you do the math on like what is a large amount of good dollar? Because right now it doesn't really
Yeah,
have much, intrinsic value to it. And I was thinking,
right. You see, that's the part that is like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, I mean, when money was made, like think about like the first money that ever came out of whatever. Why were prices the prices they were? Like, why was a loaf of bread like $2 instead of five?
right,
Pack of
right.
eggs, like, okay, like did somebody just pull those numbers out of their ass, or like did it mean anything? So it's really kind of confusing when we grow up in school to think that, like, you know you graduate, you get those grades, and then you work hard at a job. But then it's like, okay, but like have you ever like considered asking your teachers, but like, okay, so when my mom goes in a store, or my dad, or whatever, one of my relatives, myself, and this is worth this much, like, what determines like how much a person has worked for that money, and how much that person's worth is worth. So it's just like with it, but with regular money we're used to it.
Mm.
But with these digital currencies, it's like, okay, how much should be considered for something? And I guess that's just something we make up as we go along. I don't
Right.
know.
So I really am hoping to have someone from the organization come on and talk to them, because they've, gone about this and said the core demographic of the people we're trying to reach are people in developing areas who don't have access to banks, who don't have access to these things. And because the good dollar has a certain amount of capital staked to it, it does have the United States dollar backing it in some way, insofar as the crypto market is a speculative market based on the United States dollar. So, to some degree, people in these developing countries will be trading good dollars, and they want them to trade good dollars with good dollars. Like, they don't want people pressing the claim button, getting their $7 good in a day, and then immediately going and trading those good dollars for United States currency, because they want the trade to happen specifically with, I'm going to give you good dollars for X, Y, Z. And that's an interesting concept. And it is like, it begs the question, is it not going to be, because you need to have adoption for it to happen the way we want it to. But the adoption needs to occur in a way where the benefit mainly lines up in communities that are not tied down to the existing financial framework, out of just the way that they live. They don't have access to banks. They don't have access to a government that's not so corrupt that has just destroyed any ability they might have to engage in these systems. So those are some of the questions that I have for them. But I also do think, like, it's early days. You deciding to trade some of your good dollars to me, I can't trade my good dollars for any money, but I still have to sit there and wonder, like, okay, well, what am I going to accept from you? And it does broaden out into how I've thought about universal basic income in Andrew Yang's framing. Is ideally the $1,000 will be able to take care of rent. I know in a lot of areas in this country it will not, but if we can work our way up to a true basic income, a little bit more needs to be necessary in that initial fund to give as like luxury services, or to trade with other actual people rather than
Yeah,
institutions.
that's an interesting point you bring up. And there's also something else called karma credits. And it's like, for you doing good deeds, like, you get a karma credit. So look, like, here's the thing. Here's the thing that, like, as a guy who tries to think of myself as a decent and friendly person, I know that there are a lot of people out there who just like screw people, for like lack of a better term, and they're always looking like, how can I get like the most while giving the other person the least? Like, how can I leverage this opportunity that, if I am like a sociopathic lunatic, that I'll just get everything and they'll get nothing, but I'll promise them that they'll get something. But of course, that promise is a load of crap, and they're never going to know that until, XYZ happens. So it's like, it's funny because now I'm interviewing you, and I mean, or you, me, or whatever you want to call it, but I have not given you the good dollars. But then it's like, but then it's like, what determines that? How about if a person is just like a pleasant human being that I like being around, and who's not an asshole? Is there some value in that money cannot buy?
Mm. Mm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, and I struggle with accepting gifts and things, and like
Mhm.
if I do like if I mow my elderly grandparents' lawn or something, and they ask me like, how much do you want for doing this task? like that's the hardest question to answer. I'm like, well, listen, I would do it for free. The only problem is that I have to be able to pay rent, and
Right.
that is a hard kind of, And a lot of people have like approached me in life and said, you can't go about your day to day living with this mindset, because you need to take, you need to hustle,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Right.
sitting here kind of like, well, that's not where I am. That's just not how I am. I do things for the value and benefit
Right.
of other people. That's my compensation, truly. So balancing that has been one hell of a circus act.
Right. Well, that's the confusing part to me, because I think when we grow up, we're not really this is not really explained to us. All we're told is that there's this, light at the end of the tunnel, or the gold at the end of the rainbow when you're done with all your studies and getting all your good grades, and it's called a job. And it's just like set in stone, and it's like that. But then we're never told, like, what's a negotiation. You know what? Because we can never negotiate with, like, the administrations of our schools or like our universities, and everything is just set in stone, and it sets such a terrible precedent for the 21st century, where everything is a negotiation. Everything is kind of like that, and we are not even told that. Like, we're just told that the goal at the end of the rainbow is the job that you get after you're done with all your studies and your good grades and all of that stuff. But we're never told why layoffs happen.
Mm,
And you can be like the best worker to work at a place ever, and you can love your job, but if that store or manufacturer or fill in the blank isn't selling enough of X that they sell, bye bye. Doesn't
yeah.
matter that you worked hard. Doesn't matter that you liked it. Doesn't matter that you had a good personality. Doesn't matter all the grades that you got in school. But we are not, like, it's never discussed with us how these things work.
Mm,
And I just find that to be mind-bogglingly idiotic. And they say, well, you can major in that when you go to university if you want to. But it's like, no. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Like, put on the brakes and back it up. You had 12 years in public school to discuss these things with us, and you're telling us we can learn it on our own. Our priorities are warped.
mm. Yeah, I completely agree. And it is interesting too how the concept of money shifts based on your lived experiences. People with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money, probably, especially those people, would look at me when I would approach them and try to not take them for every dollar that I think that I could get from them. They probably wouldn't care if I got like more than the actual worth of a negotiation that the two of us were engaging in, right? They would probably say, "Hey, good job for you," because they've got it, right? And it's not going
Right.
to really affect them in terms of the scope of their actual wealth that they have. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
approaching it from the experience that basically everyone in my immediate social circle is down on hard times. So it shifts the way
Yeah.
that you go about interacting with the
It's
world.
pretty interesting. I mean, for me, it's like there's no value in money and just like the paper and the numbers in the bank account. That's just like there. But okay. Here's the funny thing. Like, my grandfather was wealthy when I lived up in that house, and then he would just like say, "Hey," he would just like give me $100 just for fun. He's like, "Here you go. Like, you've been doing good. Here's $100." But then I'm like looking at that piece of paper, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't have a car to drive down to a store."
Hmm.
It's so then it would directly go to my mother, and then, like, whenever that thing, so it's like I cannot use this because, this was before Amazon and the internet and all that stuff. Like I had to be able to go somewhere to exchange that money for something, but I I'm not old enough to drive, and I'm living in a place that needs driving. So it's like, okay, so then, what's the value of, like, when and I remember when I would have my birthday parties and I would be given these sums of money, and then I'd feel a little guilty that I was just being given it, and I didn't earn it, so because it was just given to me. but then I kind of thought to myself, like, hang on a second, like, I'm not a drug user. I'm like a relatively decent human being who doesn't like want to bother people or hurt people or do anything bad, and I do take my studies in school seriously. So why don't I deserve this money? Why do I have this feeling of guilt? So I'm like, screw that, and then I'm like, well, like, and then when the bailouts of 2008 happened, I was just like, okay, like, none of this makes any sense anymore. Like, you're supposed to be a person who, like, gets the money because you worked, or at least you're like a decent human being. But I'm like, hang on a second. These people just like screwed everyone over and crashed the entire economy, and they're being given like tons of this money for free. And then I'm like, okay, like, what the hell is going on over here?
Yeah, yeah, like that's the point. I mean, that's the schism, right? And that's when things start
Right.
to stop making sense, when that illusion breaks, the illusion that you've been told since you've been growing up, and then you kind of, and it's enough to really shake anyone's world when you realize that you when you get wealthy enough, you'll reach a point where the rules no longer apply to you. The rules that we've imposed on people, that hey, you know what, if you take a risk and you fail, that's that, bud. That, no, it actually, it's the other way
Right.
around. You have this rugged capitalism for the poor and
Yeah.
socialism for the rich.
Exactly. Okay, okay. You hit on that. And I want to hit on something else. You were talking about that you kind of lived the same as me, where like things were far away from you and you would like go into the world of video games. So here's the beautiful thing about the world of video games is that when you make a mistake, you have like an extra life, right?
Hmm.
So it's like okay. So now pretend there was a video game, just like entertain my thought a little bit, or what do you call that? Damn, there's a special word for it. But okay, so you lose like a life in the video game, and the video game just explodes, and you can never play it
Right,
again. Like,
right.
there's no respawning and stuff like that, and it's like, why do we not do that? Because it's like, it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't make anybody happy. People would be pissed off, and people deserve chances. People at least deserve like a shot at doing something, and sometimes people deserve more than one shot, because at the first shot they're just like getting their bearings. They're just like finding out what's going on. So I see the UBI as playing a game that has an extra life. So, if you lose one life, it's not like you can never play the game anymore. It's just like, okay, here's an extra life. You learn something from that. So, and then that's how you kind of like have that to like keep learning and learning. But what happens when that's not there? I don't want to take that risk, so I don't want to learn, because I know that, like, if I make that one mistake, I can end up with absolutely nothing, and it's game over.
Yeah,
Game over. And it's like, it's not like game, like, there's a game over that says like continue, yes or no, but then it's like game over, and they're not even asking if you want to continue. It's like, you can't. It's just game over permanently. So it's like, that's pretty disgusting.
yeah.
That's pretty evil. That's pretty grotesque. Why do we do this in real life, but we're not sick enough to even do this in a video game? Think
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I'm not going to say that, but there was a movie that came out probably about half a decade ago called Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise and what's her name, Emily Blunt, I think. Did you happen to watch that movie?
I heard about it, but just
It's
if you explain the plot a little bit.
it's really good. Like, it's good science fiction. I was expecting it to be subpar based on the other things that were coming out around that time. I think there was like a Will Smith movie with his son that totally just tanked. Like, science fiction wasn't having a good year. And then this movie came out and it was underappreciated. They wound up rebranding it as Live, Die, Repeat. It didn't make sense to me. Apparently, it was just like it failed to get the eyes on it that it needed to. I would recommend watching it when you get a chance. The basic idea about it is, I think some sort of alien race has invaded
Oh,
Earth.
I think I know, and he could respawn
Yeah,
after he
every time
died.
that he would
Okay,
die,
right,
and
yeah, yeah.
I
Kind of like the
think
game.
there
Yeah.
was some part of the alien technology that there was a
That
mistake and it fused with him, and he was the only person with this ability to kind of regenerate after a death. And it's very cool how he comes to terms with this new reality he's in, and it's based on a book that a Japanese author wrote when it was either like something like Mario or Dark Souls. I think he wrote it when he saw Dark Souls. The idea of this game that its main purpose was to frustrate the hell out of the people playing it, to die and die and die and die and die. It is a hard game, and like you, every single time you come back to the experience, you have learned from the experience before. You know to expect something now. You expect it, and then immediately something else happens that kills you. And it's just like these tiny
yeah.
micro steps that you get to greatness after repeatedly dying. It is frustrating. People will throw their controllers, and not a lot of people have the patience for it, but it's an enriching experience that I have dealt with all my life playing these video games. Is starting from like rock bottom isn't rock bottom. It
Uh-huh.
because we don't actually have rock bottom. When we think of rock bottom, it's actually this pit of like a quagmire that sinks
Uh-huh.
you lower and lower and lower. There's no twigs. Every twig you try and grab breaks,
Uh,
and you're done. It's this poverty
uh-huh.
spiral, and that's a
Right.
so that's a if you think of it in
Well,
the concept
quicksand.
of
It's
that,
like,
right?
yeah,
And if you think of it
yeah.
in that kind of concept, it's actually a massive limiter to the human ability to
Right. Okay,
achieve.
okay. Here. Well, here's the video game that we are playing. It's like when you lose on level one, then it's like you go to level -2, and then if you lose at -2, you go to like -5, and then -10, and then negative this and negative that, and it's like you can't even get to like level one again. It's like there are all these negative levels, but the other players, if they have inherited wealth, can start at like level 100.
Right,
and
right.
and and not even have to like, and their parents are basically playing him for them, and whenever they get tired of playing the game, they can just give the controller to their parents to get them to higher and higher levels, where the other player who started the game at like -100 and is going to like -150 and -200, and then we mythologize it with this American bullshit of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and like it's all your fault and all this other BS and garbage that we've like implanted into our psyche through years and years of propagandist trash.
People really need to understand this. Like, for instance, the question of uh evidence based on hearsay or evidence based on like witnessed testimony of their memory is a massive problem that in the scientific community and in law in general they're coming back to and saying, listen, human memory is actually pretty fallible. There is a hard there's a logical inconsistency, and we can put this in the realm of fallacies. What are the logical fallacies that humans deal with? And one of those fallacies is survivorship bias. And like this is something that needs to be spoken about in our society, because
Yeah.
you will actually be able to measure empirically that people who have reached some stage in life view it from only their world experience, and they imagine it to be
Uh-huh.
that same experience for the people around them.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, have you seen the movie Elysium?
no, no.
Oh, okay. Well, basically, it's like they're the rich people and they live in like space in these like interesting little colonies, and Earth has just became like a heated up cesspit of like pain and suffering and despair. And it's like, well, of course, you're going to have a different like world view, literally a different universe view if you were born on the rich space colony than if you were on this like heating up cesspit of like pain and despair. So, I mean, and it's obvious. So that's pretty sad. And I also want to bring another thing up. How many of these same people who like either like inherited wealth, or even if they didn't inherit it, if they made it, air quotes, because whatever that means for them, relative comfort, not having to worry about money. Let's just say that that's made it. How many of them would be willing to start at the bottom or even below that? How many of them are willing to like have everything taken away from them, from their bank account, from their cell phone, from any kind of like electronic thing that they had to communicate with, be sent to like a random place in the United States with like just like $1 to their name or whatever, and just say like, okay, like you believe in this bootstraps mythology, so go ahead, make yourself rich through your merits alone, through like no money, no contacts, no family, no nothing, and let's test that theory with you because you believe in it so much.
Right. And like that's a very tempting image to paint, and I always try to do so myself, but recently I've been trying to readdress this because it's never going to work from that angle, unfortunately.
Mm,
We can engage in that conversation, but I think the more interesting one is to say, listen, okay, we're not going to paint this from the idea that anyone else needs to be taken down a notch. It's just if we can get it in there to say, well, actually, it's not the equality of it's not the equality of outcome. It's the equality of opportunity. Like
mm-hmm.
you're not gonna have to lose all the privileges you have, but you are gonna have to give them to the rest of everyone else. Everyone's gonna be on the same
Right, yeah.
plate. Like all that we're asking is that other people have the ability to take risks and fail and not be like just completely drowned in this arbitrary and abstract societal tool. Like I mentioned this in the podcast that I did yesterday, is that poverty is a concept of civilization. It's not a concept of nature.
Yeah.
Survival is a concept of nature. You go out, you acquire your resources, you fight to survive, and you live. But in civilization, you come into this world having signed a social contract that you had no say in, you had no agreement
Right,
to.
yeah.
You can't break the contract, and we can say that for sure. You can't go out and just randomly start trying to acquire your own resources, because you'll get kicked off the land, or the resources are going to be tainted by some industry pollution. Or if you
Right,
even do
yeah.
succeed and get so far as starting a commune, like look at what happened to Waco, Texas, right? They don't want you doing that. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
play by the rules in society, and that means that you have to recognize that the social contract is something that needs to be a good contract.
Right, but then like for the people at the tippy top, they can break the contract at will.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like what we saw in the bailouts. It's
Hmm.
like that was just like a major breaking of the contract, and we were told, but like without like this is just like the exception to the rule. Like we can break the contract like this because if we did not break this contract, then the world would just be pandemonium, or whatever they call it, whatever they wanted to call it. But it's like, okay, then if you get to break the contract like that, then we at least get something for our trouble. So if we're making exceptions for you, if we're giving you your corporate socialism and your bailouts, does that mean you can leave all of us behind and then say, no, 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 but the contract still applies to you, but we get this, get out of jail free card because we're the important people and you guys are like, then aren't we just going back to like medieval Europe, in like a corporatized medieval Europe? I
And
mean,
that's
come on.
why that's why
you
I
know
think that the problem of survivorship bias is really it's the fulcrum on which all of this balances. It's that the people who have benefited from the social contract don't understand why it's not the same for everyone else as it was for them, and
Mhm.
that is I don't know how to fix that problem, because any attempt to try and like explain that to people results in cognitive dissonance, right? People experience an actual amount of pain when they're trying to comprehend something that doesn't match their worldview. And
Yeah, it's complicated for sure, but I no no but that's why I talked about that experiment of taking away. It's not to like knock them down a notch, and let's say it's like, okay, like you can get out of this experiment whenever you like, but it's like if we did the experiment of like taking, because they believe in the free market and they believe in like, oh, like it just takes intelligence and a work ethic and everything else is just an excuse, then we're like, okay, if we started you from zero and you're saying that, would you accept to this experiment? So that way it's like they can know it's like wrong, so it's not a theory for them anymore. That's the reason I say that, because it's like, are they willing to actually have that stuff happen to them for real instead of just having it in their head as this abstract concept,
Yeah, and with our
like undercover boss, basically. But go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
what's difficult is like how do you verify the truth in that? Because there was something I don't know. It was like, yeah, okay, they're blah blah blah. They're gonna go and actually work this job at minimum wage, but like when the cameras turn off, like they go to a hotel that's been paid for by the company and everything, right? Like if you actually sat there and
We
documented
don't
people,
turn the cameras off,
yeah,
or like we just kind of make them live in like whatever they can afford when they don't have that money. It's like, oh, okay, like how much did you work at this minimum wage job? This much. Go see if there's like a hotel around for like that much money. Oh, there's not. Okay, well, I guess you're sleeping in some, you know, place that's kind of icky and gross, but like that's all you can afford. And but you believe in the free market, so we're just showing you what it would be if like you had to, pull yourself up. So it's like, that'll work, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, right. I think
Right.
so too. And the fact that like deep down I think that they just would not accept to do that in the first place is
Well, I
there's
mean, I
some
mean that
part
that already shows that they're being hypocrites,
right. There is some
I mean,
part
we got them right there and then. It's like, okay, well, you're like you're willing to like say other people should suffer through this, and it's totally reasonable. But then when it comes to you, it's like, oh no, but not me. Well, I mean, it's just obvious at that point. It's like, well, have you ever seen like these like pride leeches, the ones that like watch like football or basketball, and then they're like, oh yeah, like this guy sucks, and like come on, like you should have done it like this. It's like, okay, well, do you want to wear the jersey and like show the guy how it's done? Like I'm sure that they would. It's like that's basically what they're doing. But instead of like basketball and football and all that stuff, it's with people who are suffering, that they
mhm.
just think that like, oh, they should have just done this and everything would have turned fine with them. But like but like because then when it's lived, like take myself for instance. I mean, like when I went to Israel to go live in a kibbutz. It was like the worst experience of my life. But it's like, but before I went, I was thinking like, oh, it's gonna be so much fun. I'm gonna have like an adventure, and I'm like really gonna feel great around these people in this place. But then like when I lived it with like my own body, then I changed my opinion just like that. So I'm thinking if we do like a social experiment with these people, well, instead of like a wife swap or an undercover boss, it's like, okay, like like the Prince and the Pauper story. Like if you think it's so easy to like be successful in this country and it's just hard work and ethics and skills, then let's take everything that you have right now and make you start from scratch. And it's like, if you're not willing to do that, then you're obviously just being disingenuous. You're
Yeah.
obviously just, yeah.
And there's some part within them, whether they would admit it or not, that knows that. And you bring up a very good point as well, that like they, we like to lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves. That's what we do the best. And if
Mhm.
you can justify the lived experience that you have by looking at people who are poorer than you and saying, well, they deserve it because of X, Y, and Z, then it's going to make you feel better. And like you won't have to think about those thoughts about like, wow, well, what if we aren't doing things in a moral and just way? What if it would be better otherwise, right? That's
Right,
it.
yeah.
If that's true, that's a hard pill to swallow if you've lived an entire life where you have believed otherwise. And like how do you deal with the cognitive dissonance of that reality? Well, you just don't, right? You're going to run away
Right.
from it.
Well, I always used to think that, oh, well, they just don't want to work. But then when I graduated like university, I had this thing. I'm like, hey, hang on a second. Nobody told me that like job hunting was this much of a pain in the neck. Nobody told me like the managers and the HR and like all of that stuff. Well, then a guy with like tattered clothes and hardly any money can't even get a job in this environment. And hang on a second, I come from like relative well-to-do people, and I'm having trouble, getting work. So like our whole like societal mythology it's just that. It's just BS. I was just amazed at the level of like trouble I had when the recession kind of kicked into gear, when I was like just trying to find some regular job. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, why the hell? Like, this is just like a minimum wage, like, I can do this job like in my sleep kind of thing. And they're asking all these questions and they want all these references and credentials. And like, they want you to be like, oh, I'm like, what is it? This is bullshit. I was just amazed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and right around that time too, technology's been connecting us in ways that we have never been connected with before. Right around that time, Twitch streaming became a thing, right? People are sitting on their
Right.
computer
Yeah.
playing video games, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah.
Like insane types of revenue streams. And as me, someone who's entering into the workforce at the turn of the 2010s, I'm sitting here going, things are not adding up here. Things are not adding up whatsoever. The value that humans bring, right? This is what Yang talked about when he says
Uh huh.
human value is
Yeah.
not economic value. And
Right.
there's that schism in the logic of the predominant mainstream that says, you need to work to earn your keep. But also, when you work hard, you will reap the benefits of what you've sown. And that's just, like you said, not quite true. You can work as hard as you want, 3 jobs,
Right. Yeah.
juggling everything, and you'll never get out of the situation that you exist in.
But some people aren't even given a chance. I mean, at least a video game gives, like, you start with like one life. It's like when you're like barred from even entering, that's just unfair BS in and of itself.
Right.
Because it's like, but then they tell you, okay, here's the part that just blew my mind, and just like I said, okay, this is like crazy. They say like, well, nobody even owes you a job,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a, you have to earn your ability to earn money.
Right.
Okay, like be and then they say, well, then you say like, oh, but like I applied and I didn't get hired. Well, nobody owes you a job. And then you're like, okay, but I need money. Well, why don't you just go get a job? How do you, it's like, excuse me,
I've spoken
stupid,
with
like,
people who
it's
believe,
like,
who believe that you shouldn't be paid for like your initial job. Like it is a privilege and a
it's
dignity to be chosen to learn the skills
unpaid
of
internships, right?
right, right. And there are
Right,
people out
yeah.
there who like think you should be paying me to work here. Like they can go off
Okay,
the
yeah,
deep
yeah,
end.
and that just gets into like an incomprehensible level of like corruption and cognitive dissonance and bullshit, and just I have many more adjectives, but like, I mean, I know a person, and I'll say, like, she lives in Pennsylvania, and she, uh, god, it's so sad because she's come across like all of this, and she was born into like generational poverty and all this stuff, and it's really, really hurting her. And she's like intelligent, she has like a math degree and like all this stuff, but like, but then like with right to work laws, it's like you can do the job perfectly, they can just like not like the color of the socks that you're wearing into work, get rid of you, and not even tell you why. And we say that like we're living in this meritocracy. That is the biggest load of crap on the face of the earth right now.
Right, right. And if you
Yeah.
actually wanted to have a meritocracy, then you raise that floor, and people
Right.
like the ability to say no is so important, right? Like I want to be able to
Right.
say no to all of this BS. Like I know that you are
Yeah.
taking advantage of me,
Uh-huh.
and like if I just had the ability to say no, if you really needed people, you would pay them, and you would pay them what they're worth or what they're willing to
Right.
accept. Free market capitalists
But
love to say that
uh,
every negotiation is a free trade between
yeah,
two
that's a
willing
load of crap.
parties. Yeah.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? I mean, but look at what school is, right? I mean, like, basically, like, you're taking money from the taxpayer from like property taxes, and you're paying into the same exact system that like didn't teach you about money. How stupid is that? It's like, and then, and no, no, but in school, like, we have to say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because we'll get in trouble if we don't. And then that's where the mythology comes in, that like be a good work for no money, say yes to those internships, do this and that. And like, okay, so we're going to a place like sometimes against our own free will, that we don't even get to choose our teachers, we don't even get to choose our classes, we don't get to choose like what they're telling us, and we don't even get to verify if it's true or not. And you're telling me we're being sent out into the world where like it's a level playing field? No,
Yeah, our
no, sorry,
compulsory
I'm not buying that.
education,
I'm not buying. I think that's bullshit.
it does seem that our compulsory education really
Right,
fundamentally exists to tell people how to take orders, to not question the authority, to
right.
not
And then
question.
we're told that like we have all the negotiating power and we have freedom and all this other crap.
Right, right. I remember, I made it through high school
Mhm.
with no issues up until the very end. It was crazy. We had like 4 weeks or so before graduation, and I always had lunch with the band kids in the band hallway, and I went to class after lunch break. I left my bag in the hallway, and I didn't think about it, but that's a bomb threat apparently, and
Wow.
and like because I was going to another class that I didn't need my stuff for, and like that hallway was my home. The band kids, we lived there basically, and I get called into the principal's office. That she's got the police officer in there holding my backpack. He's got this, just he's got that look and everything, and she's going through my entire educational history, and she says, you've never been called in here before, and she's like, I'm your grades are good and everything. I was like, yeah, like I'm a good student. I always have been. And like in the 30 minutes that I was in there, she completely stripped me of every ounce of like belief that I had in myself as like a person who I thought that I was a good student and everything. And I suddenly went through something that kids have started education with all throughout their educational system. Like she said, you're about to enter into the workforce and everything. This is, and she's, because, okay, like I had just turned 18. So I went out and I smoked some cigars to celebrate with my other friends who were above 18. And I left the cigar package in the front end of my backpack. And I didn't even think about it, right? It was empty. There was no actual cigar in there. There was not a trace of any kind of
Right.
tobacco in it. And she pulled it out and she slapped it on the table. And she was like, you need to think about the decisions that you're making. And it was it shook me, and I left there feeling bad about myself, feeling bad about,
Right. Yeah.
and that's what they are there to
Well,
do.
well, yeah, yeah. Like, okay, so basically, like, school is like this totalitarian, fascistic non-democracy that's supposed to be preparing us for the exact opposite of what we went through. Give me a break. Give me a break. Like,
Yeah.
and then libertarians like to say like, oh yeah, like, you know,
And
it's
like
bullshit.
I was
It's
actually starting to go through a little bit of a rebellious phase that I had not had
right.
previous. And people go through rebellious phases at that age. That's really
Mm-hmm.
what they do. And I had almost made it out of school without having that experience. And then again, survivorship bias, I would be looking around at the misfits and thinking, why can't you just get your act together? Well,
Right.
they
Yeah.
they were cast into that type of, like, once their eyes are on you, it's over, because then
Right.
you're picked out and you're just bullied and bullied and bullied. You go to the
Right.
principal's office every
Oh, yeah,
week,
yeah. Here's okay. This is hilarious. I like shocked my English teacher when I did this. Like he said like think of like a bully and like how they make you feel, and like write like a like 5 paragraph essay about like a bully and why bullying is bad. So like I turned the thing on its head, and then I called the school system a bully. I said, this bully forces me to be somewhere that I don't want to be, make me do things that I don't want to do, like tell me things that are absolutely useless, like forces me to like, write things down that are just like don't make any sense, and judges me every step of the way with a bunch of like arbitrary meaningless letters. And then I said it's and then he was just like his circuit stopped working at that point. It's like
Yeah.
he's like, but you don't want an education? How dare you? And then I'm like, no, I have nothing against education. I just don't like being bullied and not told like what all this stuff means, and he had nothing to come back with after that. It's
And
like,
really,
what are you gonna say?
the
It's like
the majority of my worldview has been informed since I graduated in the past 10 years. Because
mm,
again, like I was in high school reading Atlas Shrugged and really buying into the entire
mm,
mythology of the
right,
meritocracy, which is an illusion, right? It
yeah,
is an
bullshit.
illusion if you look at the way the system functions at all. And like
Yeah,
up there at the end, as that rebellious phase kind of kicked in a little bit, if those months had passed and I graduated, right, I probably would
right.
have entered into the workforce having a fundamentally different view of
Mm,
authority. They started the impetus that changed the way that I was thinking about things. And now
right,
with the internet, you have knowledge at the tip of your fingertips, and you
right.
can choose to educate yourself. I can pull up Duolingo and learn a new
Yeah,
language if I
like
really want
I,
to.
I mean, think about how stupid this is. It's like, oh yeah, but like you have negotiating power, but it's like, okay, can I negotiate with like my teacher of how much homework that he's gonna assign to me as like another student? Like, can I negotiate that he gave me like a B and I can just like go and then like, what are like the first things that they tell you in school? Like, don't socialize and like don't give me excuses and like my word is like the word of God. And it's like, oh yeah, you're just preparing us to be the best entrepreneurs. Just like we can't do our own thing, your word means everything, we can't talk to our peers, and like all of a sudden America's going to be this country where everyone's like independently minded and entrepreneurial. Blow it out your ass. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm. This is so here. This is what the
it's
future of
like
education is going to be.
right.
I've been looking at GPT-3 with
Mm,
insane amount of just awe and interest because it's doing some very incredible things. GPT-3 is an artificial intelligence that is showing some very significant, levels of intelligence. Like I won't get into really all the aspects of is it going to be sentient or not. At the end of the day, our phones are carried around with us in our pockets. I when I was in middle school, I didn't get my first smartphone until like the last end of high school. So I would go home, and that's when I would be able to get on Facebook and everything. But now, kids these days, these phones are in their pocket 24/7. They know they know these things about us. They know what our relationships are like. They know where we go to eat, what our preferences, what our interests are, what our browsing is. Like that data is important and needs to be protected. But the data itself can be used for good. All technology can be used for good or evil. But what you can do is essentially you can make an artificial intelligence that is custom tailored to the personality, to the way that people learn. Like there's different learning traits. Like you can be kinetic, you can be auditory, you can be visual in the way that you process and retain information. You could custom tailor an artificial intelligence to act as a teacher in your pocket, which
All right,
communicates with you, it texts with you, it sends you
right.
messages and says, "Hey,
And it can't send you to detention, can it?
well,
It
and
can't
it's
give you an F.
and its purpose isn't to discipline you. Like its purpose is to inform and teach you in the way that you interact and
Yeah,
interface with the world. And like you can do it
yeah,
in more subliminal ways. And I'm not trying to like say be disingenuous about it because I think education and learning is an innately human thing. And when you do it right, it's not going to feel like indoctrination. It's not going to
right,
feel like
exactly. It's like it can't, it can't harass you. You
mm-hmm,
know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
It's like it can't make you feel bad. It can't tell you that you'll never get a job or you'll never amount to anything.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like, and I swear, it's so gross how it's like we're living in this land before time that we were living in when we went to school, and then we were just like released into a world where we were like completely unprepared for. I mean, I was looking forward to like the flying car and like, in molecular travel or like something like that. I was not looking forward to race riots and like, cities burning and stuff. It's like, look, like you older people, you messed up. Like I say the F word here, but like, yeah, like we're like, when you're young, you're not saying to yourself, I want to grow up, I want to be unemployed, and I want there to like be no job opportunities for. You're not saying that. Like you want to do something, you want to be something. That's why I think it's such bullshit that it's like, oh no, like you're not getting this money because you don't want to make something of your life and that's your problem. No, the systems that you have in place are screwed up, and you don't understand how screwed up they are because you've been living up your own butt for who knows how long.
And they very well could
Like,
have existed to serve a utility in the past. Like it's very clear, even down to the changing bell for classrooms, that this
yeah,
system is designed to output manufacturing workers, which was the predominant industries at the time that our education system really kind of reached maturity. And one of the things they spoke about in the debate last night was like the question of manufacturing, and Trump's like, "Oh, manufacturing employment went up with me." If you take a look at the graph, it has never reached pre
God,
housing crisis, pre 2008 levels. It
yeah.
hasn't reached. But even after 2008, our output as a total skyrocketed. Like, I'm like, how can you guys be talking about employment and manufacturing and not talk about this elephant in the room?
It's
We've
disgusting.
we've completely, like, there's a very small percentage of our population
Well,
that
we
are,
we have a gerontocracy,
yeah.
and Joe Biden just today again, goddamn, like, my father looked at me and said, "Joey, a job is a lot more than just a paycheck.
Did he really
It's the
say that
way for the."
today?
Yeah,
Oh no.
he said it again. He said it again. And we have a president who doesn't pay taxes now. And it's like, no. Like, Joey, we live in a different time now, and life is a lot more than a job.
Yeah.
Like your ability to be creative, your ability to like articulate, your ability to do all these things is not dependent on your ability to repeat like a boring task over and over again that requires nothing of you than like this robotic procedure. It's like, think outside the damn box and
Yeah.
stop, yeah.
Now, at the same time, he is saying that because there's an audience that hears that and
It's the
responds
same
to it.
gerontocracy
It is. It 100% is. And the question of, does Biden because like it's a problem for me personally if Biden really is going to go into the next 4 years should he win the presidency. But again, I don't see Trump acting differently. I'll put that to the side. He goes into the next 4 years of this presidency knowing what I know about the rate of technological expansion. In the next 4 years, there's going to be significant displacement just by the nature of working from home as a phenomenon in general. There's going to be such a level of displacement that severe conflict, like technological displacement, is a precursor to conflict. We know that from the Industrial Revolution and the two preceding world wars. Like, there's when labor is disrupted, people start getting antsy, itchy, and fights happen. So if he goes into the future with this mindset, and I like, if he's saying it just to say, hey, like, look at him, he's lying and this is wrong, that's the best I can hope for. But I really, really do hope that we can take the
Okay, look,
conversation we're
like
having and put it on the national
the good
stage.
news is that there are tons of like humanity first UBI candidates who are running for like all of these seats. So no matter who wins in November, if we can get a good portion of those people in there to kind of like change the game, that's our best bet. And it's not just that; it's like this narrative that has to be crushed. So we also, as content creators, have to find a way to become more prolific. And as we discussed, I think before you live streamed it, we cannot have a cool kids club. We cannot have like, oh, like we're up here, we're the content creators. Like, we all need to be discussing with each other and sharing notes. And how are we shifting this conversation? Because when it clicks, the things that you and I are talking about, it sticks.
Mm,
So we got to find a way to make this click and stick for other people until there's a majority of our citizens here in this country and around the world who are just like, okay, like, we get it.
right. Yeah. Let's
And
make it
at
happen.
that point, it doesn't matter who the president is, because they're like, we're gonna have marches on DC, like 1 million people, and they can no longer ignore what we're talking about. And I think with Joe, it's not like he's like malicious, he just doesn't like get it. But if
Right.
Andrew Yang just like if like it was me, you, Andrew Yang, and like Paget in like a room with Joe having a long conversation, I think we'd get somewhere.
Ideally, having a place at the table, and some of the comments here in my chat, Alex P asks, what do you think Yang's plan is regarding this whole support behind Biden? Again, I bristle when I hear Biden say something like that, and I think, oh gosh, is my voice actually going to be heard? And at the end of the day, like, we have to work with what we can work with, and that sucks. I know that sucks. There's more to look forward to in the down ballot candidates like you mentioned, but we need to try and work within the system and not take our ball and go home just because we'd rather it be.
Yeah, no. I'm not talking about that.
Right,
It's
that's
like
not what you were saying, but I was responding to.
we keep no. We keep knocking at it. We keep knocking at
Mhm.
it, and you see, like, here's the thing that I find with like Yang Gang. It's like I think Yang was kind of like a little too nice during the debates, but like if we have a little bit of this like ferocity and passion that kind of like the Trump side had, but like we combine it with like the logic and articulation, we can really get somewhere. We can really like do something. And if we I know this may sound a little crazy, but like if we can make like a big enough spectacle of ourselves that gets a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people interested, things will change. I mean, look at this. Like so much of our discourse and all this stuff is just about clout and just shamelessly pandering. Like Joe Biden playing Despacito for like the Latinos in Florida just for this like little shameless. But like if we can do something like that, but in the direction of UBI and like get the attention of like the people at the top, I mean, we're gonna really have a fighting chance. We're really gonna
Yeah.
have something, but it's gonna require like a little bit of ferocity and passion on our part.
And this was what, I love the idea that Yang had about driving around and campaigning with a big truck that had a hologram on the back of it of him campaigning, right? So like he wouldn't
Right.
even be there, but he would be giving his stump speech on a mobile platform that presented like, hey, the technology of the future is here. I know personally I'm shifting my channel. I'm going to try and be producing more content that is made with artificial intelligence involved in it, because I've spent only about a week so far actually trying to put this into effect, and I'm able to do some pretty amazing things as someone who
Awesome.
does not have a creative bone in my body, and I own the rights to the things that I'm making because it was made by an algorithm. It's not owned by a previous human, so I can publish things. I can make AI generated music, AI generated artwork, and I'm going to try and amplify that and say, listen, it's here right now. It's going to be
Yeah.
disrupting us more and more and more, because that might interest people.
Yeah. I actually want to show you something. It's like on a magazine. Let me see. It should be right there. Just like. Okay. Um. Well. Anyway. There was a beautiful picture of this airship looking thing, and it said like travel in 2015, the way of the future, and it showed this like zeppelin like blimp like over the Alps, and it's like just imagine this as being like traveling, and it's like that was it. Like I remember being like 10, 11 years old and like watching TV shows like the Jetsons and all of that stuff, and looking forward to that. But then I'm like, what direction are we heading to like
Right.
right now, you know?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is this is a big problem, and I talked about this in depth in a podcast that I conducted yesterday. It'll be going live soon, and I think you'll get a lot of interest out of it, as will anyone who's listening to this right now. I pointed out the eviction of a tenant that I saw during the pandemic crisis. The landlord's outside of it, and like there's a reporter asking him, don't you feel bad about this? What with everything going on?" And he looked at her and said, "No, I don't feel bad at all. If you walk into that house, you'll find a flat screen TV. These people are parasites." And like dude, where can you go today to buy a TV that isn't a flat screen, that isn't affordable for really all intents and purposes? Like, if you just get a flat screen because you got a bonus paycheck a year ago, and then you having that flat screen in your possession when times go sour the next year is the reason to completely cast aside your humanity and to paint you as a parasite, then the exponential rate of technology will never actually make society a better place, because what the thing that's bringing us back is our belief that the boons of a society are based solely within the merits of your continual dedication to a system that extracts everything from you, unless you're wealthy, right? Back to the earlier part of the conversation. And that's a dystopia. We're already in a dystopia. The fact that
Yeah,
TV is what cast him as a parasite is the proof in the pudding. I guess, is that the word? Is that the phrase? I don't
yeah,
know. It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
proof that we are currently existing within a broken paradigm, a dystopian society. It's
It's
very wrong.
it's completely just dysfunctional and ridiculous to have like uh, Stone Age mindsets in a space age era.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't know how else to put it, but like we need to get to the cockpit soon
Hmm.
because like these people are just aiming it at a mountain face.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty sad.
I mean,
It,
unfortunately, because I like to try and end things optimistically, and what we may just have to have the optimism saved for another live stream, because we are running up here on our oh wow, that was an hour down the hatch just like that. But
yeah.
before we wrap things up, I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to plug in your channel and make sure everything you've got, send it over here, and I'll add it into the description of the video afterwards too.
Sure, 100%. So, basically on YouTube, I'm Revolutionary Thinking. So it's just RevolutionaryThinking. Said the way it's spelled, one word, youtube.com/revolutionary thinking. And then I'm Ariel's on Twitter. So that's ARIELS. So like that's I kind of want to start this drone photography thing, and you can find that on YouTube too. That's my other account, and yeah, just feel free to reach out to me on those on any platform you can, and I'm sure like any more questions, I can answer those because we just need to collaborate. We need to get our voices heard, and and we can talk through the internet and through these digital mediums because we don't have any of these borders anymore. It's just a free exchange of ideas to just improve things.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully we don't get confined into these echo chambers that we're so prone to do. I know one of your videos that I watched that I can recommend to some people is you spoke about fulfillment in one recent episode, I think about 2 weeks or so ago. Is that how you kind of get your stream of consciousness through? I think you were walking as you were recording.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's one of the things. It's like I walk when I record because that like I kind of think well like that, and even like right before I go to sleep, it's like I've always had a like wondering mind. Like I always had that like inquisitive mind, and I'm like always asking myself questions. And like I like as young as I was, since I like watched a lot of cartoons, played a lot of video games, I was always kind of like combining ideas together just for fun, just to like see what happens, and like doing that stuff. So it's like I have so much mental capacity and the capacity to like analyze and create, but so much of it it's just like in me. But it's like, okay, how do I make something of that?
right.
So that's kind of like what I'm figuring out, and I would try to like reach out to people like you and others, but now is the time when I'm gaining a little bit of my momentum and like I'm really kind of like building my brand.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the next conversation we have, talking about what it's like to be a content creator, also within the framing that we mentioned earlier of the types of personalities that I may be, that you may be. It's been tough. Like I have this paradigm of I want to be a content creator, but I also can't stand looking at any of the things that I produce. I'm so overly critical. And then you've got the
Yeah,
numbers games, and the question of fulfillment lies at the center of it all.
right.
And it lies at the center of universal basic income too, in very interesting ways. So I think next time you're on, we'll have an entire episode
Yeah.
based around that
Uh,
idea.
For me, it's more like I always saw myself that I could have been this firebrand, really, because like hypocrisy just gets on my nerves so much, especially when it's hypocrisy that I see that you know people who are doing like stupid ridiculous things live these lives of like luxury, and like they never have to worry about money, and like they can make some like viral video, but it's not like adding to the discourse or the discussion, or it's not like value added to humanity. It's just like a spectacle for the sake of itself that people just go crazy over. And then you have like the real renaissance men of our time, and the real like technology people who have like ideas that can help so many people and do so many amazing things. But since they're not making spectacles of themselves or going insane, like they're not getting any attention. And I'm like, we have to reverse this
Yeah,
before we're all doomed. I
that's a
mean,
problem that both
yeah,
lies in the algorithm, that lies in where people's attention can mostly be hacked and brought to. It also lies on the hegemony that these existing success cases that may not actually be providing that much, and they have an interest in preventing a mobility up the ladder to like, my thoughts are, if
yeah,
you have the basic income, these people still have their power structures, but just based on the fact that you now really do truly have a meritocracy. Within 100 years, the people who refuse to let go of anything, even though they would still have had that accrued wealth, just by the nature of an atrophy, because you would find out who doesn't actually provide that merit. The meritocracy is a idea that I enjoy thinking about as a concept, but recognizing it as the illusion is what's difficult for sure.
right. It's easy when you can just take the elevator to the penthouse and then just rig it to explode, and tell everybody lazy that for not like climbing in the shaft of the elevator, which
Right.
is like much harder. So it's like that. It's like, and then it's like once you get to the top, then you create the rules that got you to the top. It's kind of like the same thing. If I don't know if you ever saw the movie Wreck It Ralph,
Mhm.
with like Turbo was King Candy, and he went into the source code to like make the glitch. And you see these people are like giving us this myth while they have the ability to go into the source code and give themselves cheats and
Yeah.
perks and anything they want, and they're passing it off as this meritocracy.
Yeah.
And we can kind of see past that, but unfortunately other people can't.
Yeah.
So
They're
yeah.
gaslighting us almost.
Right,
Yeah,
right, exactly.
that's a wild idea. All right. Well, that's going to do it for
Yeah.
today's episode of the Daily Dividend. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for joining me along. There'll be another live stream later on today, so stick around if you're interested. Ariel, thank you so much for reaching out and appearing on my show. You have a wonderful day today, and we'll be back for another interview at some point in the future.
Perfect. I never got your name.
Oh, my name is Seth. Yeah, you can refer to
Seth.
me as Seth. I
Okay.
I
Seth.
don't actually go by it that often for sure, but
Okay.